commencer. So it's good to start. Looking for a nod from anybody. Okay, well I guess I'll just start then. So welcome to this talk. It's Seamless iFrames, the future today. Going to introduce you guys to kind of a cool browser feature that's coming up called Seamless. You'll learn about it in a moment. Just before we get there, a little bit about me. My name is Ben, and I'm traveling here today from San Francisco, California. I'm originally from Canada, though, so I pronounce some words a little funny to some probably not here. I work at a company called Discuss. We do conversation platform on the web. You've probably seen it in a bunch of places. I also have been writing a book called Third-Party JavaScript. It's about best practices for doing third-party scripting on the web. And there's my Twitter handle. That's what the book kind of looks like. It's in its final production stages, and I think it'll be in print in a couple months. Pretty excited about that. So a little bit about the place that I work. It's called Discuss. That's what the logo looks like. Distributed commenting platform, and it's served as a third-party JavaScript application. We're served on a lot of big web properties: CNN, Time, IGN, People Magazine, Major League Baseball, big list, and you can find more at discuss.com. Because we're on all these big web properties, we also get a lot of traffic, so we get somewhere in the area of 6 billion page views a month. If you're not familiar with Discuss, it kind of looks like this. I don't know how easy that is to see, but this is a website called Droid Life. It's like an Android community on the web, droid-life.com. You can take a look. And at the end of one of these reviews, I have a commenting section here, and this is where you'll find Discuss. And there's people commenting. You can vote up and down stuff. There's a community view. You can share articles and comments and whatever. So one thing that's really fun for me is in this last year, we actually just rewrote all of Discuss on the client for the first time in years. So we use some modern tools. Backbone, Ender is like a packaging library of micro libraries that gives you this kind of like jQuery kind of tool set. We also use Less for doing style sheet generation. Uses our public API, although we have a couple of endpoints that are private because for scale and all that stuff. We also do real-time comments, which is new, so like a feature we brought in because that's really hot right now. But the thing that I'm most proud about Discuss is that the new version is actually completely served inside of an iFrame. So if I bring back up that page from earlier, there's a red line now over where the iFrame is. And if you were viewing the page before, you probably wouldn't have never noticed that the iFrame was there. We're doing a bunch of trickery to kind of make it feel that the Discuss application is a part of the parent document. So I know what people usually think when I start talking about iFrames, which is, well, first of all, not another 3D slide deck, because that's a little played out these days. But iFrames, really? Are iFrames interesting? I think that people still have this, the word frame is really dirty. People just think of it as this hacky thing that nobody wants to touch or talk about. And it harkens back to this time when we used frames as almost like a style tool. We didn't have very good CSS, so if we wanted to subdivide a page, we'd use frames. Here I'm using a frame for a sidebar and a nav bar. This web page actually exists if you want to check it out and play around with it. 1997.texasjavascript.com. But for me, as a third-party JavaScript kind of guy, I think iFrames are really cool. They're sandboxes, so JavaScript code that's running inside of an iFrame can't access, JavaScript code outside of the frame, which can be very helpful. If I'm trying to inject an application on somebody's website and they've done terrible things to their JavaScript environment, like take a core array method array.prototype.push and just do something silly with it, that won't impact me because I'm inside of the iframe and nothing has been touched inside of the iframe. So I get to avoid bugs that way. This way, it's also just more secure. If there's a cross-site scripting vulnerability outside of the iframe, that won't impact anything that's inside of the iframe. And it goes the other way around. If Discuss had a cross-site scripting vulnerability, that would be super terrible. But the upside is that it would never impact your page. Does that make sense? And lastly, it's better privacy for users, especially for an application like this. Just by keeping things separate, a parent page can't read into the iframe and try to figure out details about you, right? We can say inside of Discuss, we can say, hey, you're Joe or you're Jill, and the parent page will never know, and they can't kind of glean insights about who's visiting their pages that way. So those are some cool things about iframes, but they also have some downsides too, of course. If you want to style content inside of an iframe, just as you have that sandbox property that separates everything, you can't do it. You can't. Can you guys see that a little bit, or is it? Yeah. Like you can't make a rule that says, give this element inside of the iframe a font property. Probably you don't want somebody to make it Comic Sans on you, but maybe you do. If you have links inside of the iframe, they're actually going to navigate the iframe and not the parent document, which can be really difficult if you're trying to do kind of a seamless experience. You don't want, if I have a user link that's inside of an iframe, I don't want it to move the iframe. I want it to move the parent page. And lastly, and probably the biggest thing with iframes, is that they don't expand to fit the contents. Width-wise, they do. You can say an iframe has width 100%, but just like with a lot of things with CSS, you can't give it 100% height, which can be really difficult if you have content that is constantly changing. The iframe won't adapt to kind of make that happen. So here's an example right here. Whoa. All right, well, here's an example right here, and it's intentionally not supposed to look very good. So I have an iframe inside of these slides, and unfortunately that iframe is it's like black text on a white background, which is great when it's on its own, but if I want to embed it, it doesn't work here at all. The black text obviously blends in with the black background. The font is completely different. It's hard to tell if I add more content, which is kind of hard to see, but I added some more paragraphs. Boy, this is really dark. But anyways, there's a slide bar that's here on the right, and you can't see it. But it's like I'm not scrolling the page. I'm not scrolling the document. I'm scrolling the iframe because it doesn't expand the height. And lastly, I've got a link inside of here that if I click this, it actually just loads it inside of the iframe. So that's not helpful too. And if I want to be really silly and, do some Inception type stuff, I can, just keep doing this over and over and over again and generate more iframes and such. I can't even get down there now. Oh well, you guys get the idea. So, cool thing about HTML5, which I feel like it's almost kind of old now. It feels kind of silly to have this logo up and say that it's new stuff. But one thing about HTML5 is that it doesn't really stop. We got all these really cool features with HTML5, but it's a living standard now, and so more stuff is just coming in all the time. And one of these features is the seamless attribute of iframes. So it's an attribute just called seamless. You put it on an iframe, and now you kind of get all that good stuff that I wanted earlier. So an example is CSS rules will now cascade through iframes. If I have links in the iframe, they navigate the parent document, not the iframe. And the biggest thing is now everything just expands to fit. So pretty cool feature. We're only getting it now. So I'm going to give you an example. Seamless is pretty darn good. This is actually a seamless iframe right here. So in that other example, I showed you the black text and it looked really bad. This is actually an iframed slide. So I don't know if you can see that right there. You guys see that? Yes. Just like that. Cool. So I had no styles whatsoever to make this work, right? But I put it inside of that document, and it just fits. And I got another example, because that doesn't really show the resizing. So let's go out here a little bit. Uh-oh. So this is another just another page, and has a seamless iframe. It's the same content that I showed you earlier that was on black, but now it's inheriting font. It's inheriting this purple color. And if I kind of do this and resize it, it works just fine. And now there's like a link in here, and this works correctly. All those things are basically kind of fixed. So as cool as that feature is, and I think it's super amazing. The unfortunate news is that it's actually not implemented in any stable browser. So I've been tricking you a little bit, because what I'm using right now is actually the Chrome beta channel. So this feature is in the Chrome beta. You can download it and play around with it. And that's actually a very recent development. Before it was only in Chrome Canary, which is almost sort of like the alpha build or whatever. In the past, because this has been a specification that's always been changing, other browsers have implemented the seamless attribute, but usually in this like really hokey way where they just give it a bunch of CSS that makes it look transparent and take away the borders. But it's really not seamless at all. It's just sort of a crude trick. And in the last 4 or 5 months, I haven't pinpointed the version, but Firefox and some other browsers that did this kind of CSS trick have taken it away. So if it's in Chrome beta channel, does that mean that it's coming soon? Well, maybe. There's no guarantee that just because something's in beta that it will actually roll out with a stable release. And it's been in Canary since May, so it's really like a long time this feature's been kind of brewing. In Firefox, there's no progress whatsoever. There's a ticket floating around where nobody's implemented anything, and it's not assigned to anybody. So it probably won't happen in Firefox anytime soon. Internet Explorer 10, I haven't actually verified this. I've just kind of made an assumption and looked online to see if somebody corroborates. But it's not Internet Explorer 10 either, and neither Opera. And to sort of hammer home like kind of how depressing this is, if you go to caniuse.com, which is like, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it sure shows you browser features and their support, it's just all red. There's an entry there, but it's just, there is no like green version that supports this. So this is getting really depressing, and I even have more bad news because I only learned this recently. I thought Seamless was like the coolest thing ever, and for me as a third-party scripter, I was so excited for this to come out. But it's actually, it only works on the same origin. So if you want to use a Seamless iframe, it's got to be like on the same domain, same host, port, etc. No. According to the spec, at least. So it seems like the use case is sort of, if I'm an organization and I have multiple sites, I can use Sandbox to kind of pull content from some of my other sites, and I can style them that way. And it sort of makes sense if you think about it, because the way that the CSS rules cascade is you'd kind of have to expect what kind of content you were getting into the iframe in order to style it properly. That's how I understand it, at least. But it really kind of sucks for me, because I don't think I can use it, because I'm not on the same domain. Like Discuss is not on the same domain as where we're trying to target. So I didn't mean to come here and like troll you all with this really cool feature that has limited use cases and limited browsers, and that's the end of the talk, and we all just go home. One thing that we can do is, yeah, before you leave, you can emulate a lot of how Seamless works today using JavaScript, and that's what we do at Discuss. And I'm just going to kind of, for the rest of the talk, just kind of guide you through some of the steps that we do to make it happen. It's, of course, like not 100%. It's pretty good. So the way this is going to work is you basically need 2 scripts. you need JavaScript executing on the parent page of wherever you're trying to be, and you need JavaScript inside of the iframe document. That kind of takes away some of like the security bonus stuff that you thought you'd get with iframes, but unfortunately you have to work this way. Now that you have JavaScript in both these locations, they have to talk to each other. And luckily, HTML5 has been good for us in this way because there's a feature called window.postMessage, which is a safe way for you to send messages between iframes and their parent document or windows. Have any of you used PostMessage before? Okay, like 3 hands. Going to do just like a little primer of how it works. It's pretty simple. Let's say I'm on the parent page. I need to get a reference to the iframe element that I'm working with. And on that element, I basically just say, hey, iframe, post message. And the first parameter is just like a string or an object or some data I want to send to that message. The second parameter is actually like a target origin. It's so that you can restrict your messages to only hit a specific domain. You don't have to use it. I'm using an asterisk there, which just says anybody can listen to this message. Now, inside of the iframe, I need to listen for the message. So the way you do that is through an event. And it's just like anything else. It's if you're using like a click handler, scroll handler, etc. You just want to do, you add an event listener to the window object. You listen for the message. And on the event object that comes in the handler, you can just sort of inspect it and get the data. That's not too crazy. So now that we have that, we're just going to rip through some of the ways that you can use this to solve some of these problems. And I'm probably going to talk a little fast because I think this stopped a little, or started a little late. So inheriting styles, there's a couple ways that you can go about this. You could, on the parent page, you could just walk the whole CSS tree and inspect it and try to figure out what would apply to your iframed elements. I'm really lazy, and that just sounds really intimidating to me, so I don't really do that. Possible. I haven't seen anybody who's tried it yet. Another thing you could do is you could just have the parent document specify some CSS, and you just grab that and you use PostMessage and send the CSS into the iframe. And it would all be predefined. And that would work. It's not really seamless though, because you're sort of it depends on somebody to sort of manually style it for you. So something that we do at Discuss is we just sort of take a couple styles that we think are really important. We inspect the iframe element, and we figure out stuff like font family, font color, link color, things that are pretty easy to figure out that would apply to that iframe element, and put them inside of the iframe. And that actually works really well, because usually if you just have font color, font style, etc., it'll go a long way to making that iframe feel seamless. So to go through that really quick, let's suppose that I had an iframe here. And this is on the parent document. I'm just going to inject some test elements sort of as siblings of the iframe. And I'm going to assume that whatever CSS that I sort of expected to apply to this iframe is also going to apply to those test elements. That's not going to be 100% true, but it's probably 99% true, and it's usually good enough. So can you guys read that? Do I need to make it bigger? Pretty simple. If I have a reference to the iframe, I'm just going to create a span element, append it as a sibling, and then just create an object of style attributes that interest me. And like I said, here we have color, font family, font size. If I wanted link color, I would generate an anchor tag and inspect that color. When I'm done, I clean up and I have this object to work with. Next, it's just a matter of sending that data to the iframe. So in the parent document, just as you saw before with kind of the PostMessage example, I'm going to get a reference to the iframe. And then I'm going to call PostMessage. And the data I'm going to send is I sort of have an event name. This is almost sort of a made-up kind of protocol. I'm going to send style data, and then I'm going to call this helper function that pulls out the style attributes. And then on the other side, now as I'm listening inside of the iframe, if you recall, we had an event listener. It's listening for the message event. Once I get the styles message, I'm just going to take that data and inject it into the iframe. And you can do that pretty easy with jQuery. If I just had that sort of that like object of style attributes, I can just put them right on the body, and it sort of works. This is like a really naive example. You could probably do a better job. So that's kind of it for styles. Right at the end, I have like an example, and I'll kind of show all this stuff working. Next thing is the relative links. It's like if I click a link inside the iframe, is that going to work? This is usually pretty easy if you think about it. Anchor tags have a target attribute. You can say every link is just going to target the parent, and that way if I click it, that makes sure that the link is going to open in the parent. Which works, but you have to do that all the time, and you can't forget to do it, because the moment you forget to do it once, that means that you're just going to have a bug where you click it, and now it's whatever link you had is going to open in the iframe, and it'll look bad. So it gets tired fast. It's error prone. So there's a really cool trick. I think it's cool. It involves the base element. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I wasn't. But what it does is it's meant so that you can have like a base URL for all URLs on the page. So in this example, I have a base element, and I'm going to say the base href is example.com/foo. Later in the page, if I have a relative link, it's going to be relative to that base href. Does that make sense? It's part of HTML4, has to go in the head. So it's not even a new thing. But what's really cool about it is that you can also actually put a base target attribute as well. So that means I can do the following. I can actually say, I can have a base target and say parent. And now, so this is inside of the iframe. And now inside of my body, if I have any link, by default, it's going to open in the parent. So I never have to worry about it again. There's a little bit more you can do with the base tag. Like if I want to use hash URLs, people use hash URLs now and there to like preserve state or for whatever. You can do that too with the base tag. As long as you know what like the parent link is, you can just sort of use that. You have a base target parent. href is the parent URL. And now if I have a like a hash URL, it will work just as any hash URL in the parent document would. It won't reload the page or whatever. So that's pretty cool. So if you want that referring URL, how do you get it? There's a document.refer property. It's not available all the time, so you probably don't want to use it, because I can just disable it in the browser, or there's a couple cases where it won't appear. But because I have a script, you have scripts in both locations, you can just actually just query the URL in your JavaScript that's running on the parent page, and then using POSTMESSAGE, as we did earlier, just send the data down, and then you can create a base element like that. So the last thing is just dynamic content, making everything fit. If my height changes, how do I resize the iframe? It's pretty simple. Inside of the iframe, I'm going to figure out how much content there is. But now I'm going to use POSTMESSAGE a different way. I'm actually going to send that height up to the parent page, the script on the parent page. And then in that context, I'm just going to set the height. Of course, that means that if the DOM ever changes, you have to start over, and you have to do it again and again and again. So this is an example. It's just sort of like the opposite of what we've been doing in the past. Whereas before, we were sending a message to the iframe. Now we're inside of the iframe, and we're sending a message up. So somewhere I'm going to figure out the height, and then I'm just going to use POSTMESSAGE, and I can just call window.parent.POSTMESSAGE, and it works that way too. And in the parent, I have an event listener that listens for the message, and it's very much like it was before. The difference is that I'm going to get the iframe element, and I'm just going to put the height on the iframe directly. So it would be nice if you just knew how to sort of resize the content automatically like Seamless does. There's a couple sort of like ways you can go about doing this. Mutation events are kind of deprecated. You can't use them anymore. There's mutation observers, which is a new feature. It's not really well supported, but they're basically sort of events that fire that say stuff like, hey, the DOM changed. Maybe you'd want to do something about that. But because of limited browsers, I haven't really played around with it too much. You could even do something with set timeout, where you're just listening every 100 milliseconds. Did the content change? OK, resize it. I find that kind of laggy, and it's not a very good experience. So the way I've been doing it is I just kind of manually do it all the time. Now, this is sort of like, it's sort of error prone. If you got to do it all the time, you got to remember to resize it. But it basically means wherever I'm going to change the DOM, wherever I'm going to add a class or do anything, I'm just going to call a resize function. It's error prone, and you can mess up now and then. But the flip side is that it's really fast, it's really responsive, and I kind of made the call that that trade-off is worth it over the other solutions. So I'm getting the last minute flag. I've got like a demo here. Ooh. So over here, I showed you this earlier, and it's like this seamless iframe, right? So this is actually using the seamless attribute, and it does all this cool stuff. Using the techniques that I kind of showed you in these slides, you can get pretty dang close. So this is the simulated version. Obviously, it's very simple. You saw how I was just taking like font color and font style, and that works really well here because there's not that much going on. But for the most part, it works pretty good. And if I decide to resize the content, it just works, and you don't notice. And the base tag is in here, and I can click this, and then it uses the link. So that's that. And if you're curious, so this is Firefox. This is the seamless attribute in Firefox today. This is what the iframe would look like otherwise. Just kind of useless. But now, if I use the simulation, it works. So there is an open source library out there. I didn't work on it. It's by the folks at NPR. I think there may be someone here from NPR today. It's a jQuery library. It just does the resizing part, and it relies on set timeout to sort of do that timer thing and just try to figure out if the content changes. But it's worth checking out if you're interested in this. But other than that, that's all I have to say today. Just one thing to note, this is sort of, I've given this talk once or twice in the past. This is sort of like the abbreviated sort of version of it. If you want to check out, there are slides on GitHub, and there's sort of like an expanded, a little bit more, you know, trickery kind of stuff. I don't know if there's time for questions or anything. If you have any questions. Sure. Are we doing microphones or, well, just go for it. No. And so the question is, so I mentioned the NPR library, but is there like a better library that just does everything I just showed? There isn't. I think it behooves me to write it. I've been wanting to. I've just been busy. I've been writing a book, so I've been kind of busy. But I have been talking to some people who are interested in seamless iframes, and we feel that the seamless attribute, as I mentioned, it's not going to work for us because of the restrictions that it has. So we're working on something. I guess maybe stay tuned, maybe. Okay. I haven't tried it too. I know that it as I was reading the spec, I'm like, so sorry. The question is, can you do something with source doc and iframes? I don't even know enough about source docs to even, I haven't tried it. I will play around with it though. Source doc, SRCDOC. Maybe just Google it. And was there a last question, or am I getting kind of? Yeah. Sandbox just sort of like restricts it more. Yeah. Yeah. From what I saw with the spec, I mean, I looked into it, it didn't look possible. And from what I've talking to with other people, it doesn't seem that way. Yeah. There's also the flip side that I've heard, which is that some people feel that seamless could be a security vulnerability, because if you just allow iframes to just sort of expand and do whatever, maybe you could use that as like a backdoor to like doing like a clickjacking trick or something. So that could be another reason as well. Cool. I know there was somebody waving that had a hand up, but.
Hello, hello. I use this technique to integrate widgets into third-party seats, and I hated it. I did exactly what you did, and it works, but I hated it. Anyway, why, since you are injecting script into the parent window, why not directly inject DOM in this parent window instead of loading an iframe on the rendering engine another time, etc.?
Right. So just to sort of repeat it is like, why bother with iframes at all? If you have a script on the parent document, why don't you just inject DOM, do everything you want to do that way? The reason is, I mean, I brought up some reasons why you don't want to do that. Just executing in the parent document is kind of unsafe. It's like an unknown environment. You don't know what they've done with the page. Maybe methods you want to use are gone or they've been altered. I had to fix a bug where somebody changed array.push to be incompatible with our code. It's just like things that you expect. DOM elements, it's just sort of a way of mitigating risk, I think.
Yes, I understand. But okay, but maybe there could be ways to clean up the DOM or modified DOM or JavaScript or anything. Okay, it's unsafe. You can't catch every situation. I know. I understand. But I still don't like the iframe technique. And I'm asking myself, I didn't search on the net, but maybe there are other future techniques coming instead of seamless iframe. I don't know, something like templates, HTML5 template, HTML5 templating or something like this.
I mean, all I'll say really quickly is that's how we used to do stuff in the past, is how you described, and it just wasn't working for us. I could have a conversation with you in private because I know they want to go. Cool. All right.
Thank you.
Anyways, thanks.